Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to start chapter 8, Devotional Paths to the Divine. You may have seen people perform rituals of worship or singing bhajans, kirtans, and kawwalis, or even repeating the name of God in silence. And notice that some of them are moved to tears. Such intense devotion or love of God is the legacy of various kinds of bhakti and Sufi movements that have evolved since the 8th century. So you have seen people singing bhajans, kirtans, etc. and worshipping, and sometimes they chant the name of the God, and during that they get the ecstasy of love of God, and tears move down through their eyes. So the idea of a supreme God. Before large kingdoms emerged, different groups of people worshipped their own gods and goddesses. As people were brought together through the growth of towns, trade, and empires, new idea began to develop. The idea that all living things pass through countless cycle of birth and rebirth, performing good deeds and bad deeds come to be widely accepted. Similarly, the idea that all human beings are not equal even at birth gained ground during this period. The belief that social privileges came from birth in the noble family or a high caste was the subject of many learned texts. So many people were uneasy with such idea and turned to the teaching of the Buddha or the Jainas, according to which it was possible to overcome social differences and break the cycle of rebirth through personal effort. Others felt attracted to the idea of supreme God who could deliver humans from such bondage if approached with devotion or bhakti. This idea, advocated in the Bhagavad Gita, grew in popularity in the early century of the Common Era. Shiva, Vishnu, and Durga are supreme deities came to be worshipped through elaborate rituals. At the same time, gods and goddesses worshipped in different areas came to be identified with Shiva, Vishnu, or Durga. In the process, local myths and legends became part of the Puranic stories, and methods of worship recommended in the Puranas were introduced into the local cults. Eventually, the Puranas are also laid down that it was possible for devotees to receive the grace of God regardless of their caste status. The idea of bhakti became so popular that even Buddhists and Jainas adopted these beliefs. So this is a figure from figure 1, a page from the South Indian manuscript of the Bhagavad Gita. So you can see the Lord Krishna is driving the chariot of Arjuna. This is the picture from a manuscript of Bhagavad Gita from South India. So a new kind of bhakti in South India, Nayanars and Alvars. So the 7th to 9th century saw the emergence of new religious movements led by the Nayanars, saint devoted to Shiva, and Alvars, saint devoted to Lord Vishnu, who came from all castes including those considered untouchable like the Pulayar and the Panars. They were sharply critical of the Buddhists and Jainas and preached adherent love of Shiva and Vishnu as path of salvation. They drew upon the ideal of love and heroism as found in the Sangam literature, the earliest example of Tamil literature composed during the early century of the Common Era, and blended them with the values of bhakti. The Nayanars and Alvars went from place to place composing exquisite poems in praise of the deities enshrined in the village they visited and set them to music. So these guys were saints, and they used to compose exquisite poem to praise the deity and go to village and town and sing the bhajans in a musical form. Nayanars and Alvars, there were 63 Nayanars who belonged to different caste backgrounds such as potters, untouchable workers, peasants, hunters, soldiers, brahmanas and chiefs. The best known among them were Appar, Sambandhar, Sundarar and Manikava Sagar. There are two sets of compilations of their songs, Tevaram and Thiruvachakam. So there were 12 Alvars who came from equally divergent backgrounds, the best known being Periyalvar and daughter Andal, Tondaradi, Podi Alvar and Nam Alvar. Their songs were compiled in the Divya Prabandham. So hagiography is a writing of saint's life. So here is a bronze image of the Manikava Saga. So you can see here the bronze image. Between the 10th and 12th centuries, the Cholas and Pandya kings built elaborate temples around many of the shrines visited by the saint poets. So wherever the saint poets visited, the Pandya and Chola kings built elaborate temples there, strengthening the link between the Bhakti tradition and the temple worship. This was also the time when their poems were compiled. Besides hagiographies or religious biographies of the Alvars and Nayanas were also composed. Today, we use these texts as source for writing histories of the Bhakti tradition. The devotees and the Lord. This is the composition of Manikava Sagar. Into my vile body of flesh, you came as though it were a temple of gold, and soothed me wholly and saved me. O Lord of grace, O gem most pure. Sorrow and birth and death and illusion you took from me and set me free. O bliss, O light, I have taken refuge in you, and never can I be parted from you. It's a beautiful poem written by Manikava Sagar. Philosophy and Bhakti. Sankara, one of the most influential philosophers of India, was born in Kerala in the 8th century. He was an advocate of the Advaita, or the doctrine of the oneness of the individual soul and the Supreme God, which is the ultimate reality. He taught that Brahma, the only and or ultimate reality, was formless and without any attribute. So he advocated that the Brahman was the ultimate reality and it is formless and without any attribute. He considered the world around us to be an illusion or Maya. So he considered everything around us to be illusion or Maya, and preached the renunciation of the world and adaptation of the path of knowledge to understand the true nature of the Brahman and attain salvation. Ramanuja, born in Tamil Nadu in the 11th century, was deeply influenced by the Alvars. So Ramanuja was born in Tamil Nadu around 11th century, and he was deeply influenced by the Alvars, who were the devotees of Lord Vishnu. According to him, the best mean of attaining salvation was through intense devotion to Lord Vishnu. Vishnu, in his grace, helped the devotee to attain the bliss of union with him. He propounded the doctrine of Vishishta Advaita, or qualified oneness, in that the soul, even when united with the Supreme God, remains distinct. So the Vishishta Advaita was different from Advaita preached by Shankara, because the Shankara believed the soul and the Supreme God is one and equal. But in Vishishta Advaita, the Ramanuja propounded that the soul and the, even if it is with a union with the Supreme, but the soul remains as an individual, and God, Supreme God, is Supreme God. Ramanuja's doctrine greatly inspired the new strand of Bhakti which developed in North India subsequently. Basavana's Veerashaivism. We noted earlier the connection between the Tamil Bhakti movement and the temple worship. This is in turn led to the reaction that is best represented in the Veerashaiva movement initiated by Basavana and his companions like Allama Prabhu and Akkamaha Devi. This movement began in Karnataka in the mid-12th century. The Veerashaivas argued strongly for the equality of all human beings and against Brahmanical idea about caste and the treatment of women. They were also against all form of ritual and idol worship. So Veerashaiva Vachanas, these are Vachanas or saying attributed to Basavana. The rich will make temples for Shiva. What shall I, a poor, do? My legs are pillars, the body the shrine, the head a cupola of gold. Listen, O Lord of the meeting rivers, things standing shall fall, but the moving ever shall stay. The saints of Maharashtra. From the 13th to the 17th century, Maharashtra saw a great number of saint poets whose song in simple Marathi continued to inspire people. The most important among them were Dhyaneshwar, Gyaneshwar, Namdev, Eknath and Tukaram. So these were famous saints, as well as women like Sakubai and the family of Chokha Mela, who belonged to the untouchable Mahar caste. This regional tradition of Bhakti focused on the Vithala, a form of Lord Vishnu temple in Pandharpur, as well as on the notion of a personal God residing in the heart of all people. So Lord Vishnu is present in all heart as a personal god. They believed that, and they used to sing small poems and Marathi songs. Like Marathi songs, they used to sing. The Vaishnava point saint of Maharashtra such as Gyaneshwar, Namdev, Eknath, and Tukaram were devotees of Lord Vithala. So Lord Vithala was a form of Lord Vishnu. Devotion around Lord Vithala gave rise to the Varkari sect, which lay emphasis on an annual pilgrimage to Pandharpur. The cult of Vithala emerged as a powerful mode of devotion and was very popular amongst the people. So it was very popular among the people around Maharashtra. These saint poets reject all form of ritualism, outward display of piety, and social differences based on birth. In fact, they even rejected the idea of renunciation and preferred to live with their family. So they were very simple, and they even rejected the social differences based on birth. They also rejected the renunciation like saints. They lived with their family, and you can see earning their livelihood like any other person. They were like any other person while humbly serving fellow human beings in need. A new humanist idea emerged as they insisted that bhakti lay in sharing others' pain. As the famous Gujarati saint Narsi Mehta said, they are Vaishnavas who understand the pains of others. So Narsi Mehta said that those are Vaishnavas who understand the pain of others. Questioning the social order. This is an Abhang Marathi devotional hymn of Saint Tukaram. He who identifies with the battered and the beaten, mark him as a saint, for God is with him. He holds every forsaken man close to his heart. He treats a slave as his own son. Says Tuka, I won't be tired to repeat again, such a man is God in person. Here is an Abhang composed by Choka Mela's son. You made us low caste. Why don't you face that fact, great Lord? Our whole life left over food to eat. You should be ashamed of this. You have eaten in our home. How can you deny it? Choka's son Karma Mela asked, why did you give me life? So here are the small hints from there. Abhang Nathpanthis, Siddhas and Yogis. A number of religious groups that emerged during this period criticized the ritual and other aspects of conventional religion and the social order, using simple logical arguments. Among them were the Nathpanthis, Siddhacharas, and Yogis. They advocated renunciation of the world. So they advocated the renunciation of the world. To them, the path of salvation lay in meditation on the formless ultimate reality and the realization of oneness with it. So they were also like the Advaita people. To achieve this, they advocated intense training of the mind and body through practice like yogasanas, breathing exercises, and meditation. This group became particularly popular among low castes. Their criticism of conventional religion created the ground for devotional religion to become a popular force in northern India. So you can see in figure 3 a fireside gathering of ascetics. So they are gathering around the fire. Islam and Sufism. The sons had much in common with the Sufis, so much so that it is believed that they adopted many ideas of each other. Sufis were Muslim mystics. They rejected outward religiosity and emphasized love and devotion to God and compassion toward all fellow human beings. Islam propagated strict monotheism or submission to one God. In the 8th and 9th century, religious scholars developed different aspects of the holy law, Shariat, and theology of Islam. While the religion of Islam gradually became more complex, Sufis provided it with an additional dimension that favored a more personal devotion to God. The Sufis often rejected the elaborate ritual and codes of behavior demanded by Muslim religious scholars. They sought union with God much as a lover seeks his beloved with a disregard for the world. Like the saint poets, the Sufis too composed poem expressing their feelings, and a rich literature in prose including anecdote and fables developed around them. Among the great Sufis of Central Asia were Ghazali, Rumi, and Sadi. Like the Nathpanthis, Siddhas, and Yogis, the Sufis too believed that the heart can be trained to look at the world in a different way. They developed elaborate method of training using zikr, chanting of a name, and sacred formula, contemplation, sama, singing, rags, dancing, discussion of parables, breath control, etc. Under the guidance of a master or peer, thus emerged the silsilas or a spiritual genealogy of Sufi teachers, each following a slightly different method, tariqa of instruction and ritual practice. So you can see figure 4, mystics in ecstasy. In Kashmir, the Rishi order of Sufism flourished in the 15th and 16th century. This order was established by the Sheikh Nuruddin Wali, or also known as Nand Rishi, and had a deep impact on the lives of the people in Kashmir. A number of shrines dedicated to Rishi saints can be found in many parts of the Kashmir. So you can see a page from the manuscript of Quran, Deccan, late 15th century. So a large number of Sufis from Central Asia settled in Hindustan from the 11th century onwards. So a large number of Sufis from Central Asia settled in India from 11th century. This process was strengthened with the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate. Chapter 3, you can see that when several major Sufi centers developed all over the subcontinent, the Chishti Silsila was among the most influential orders. It had a line among the teachers like Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti of Ajmer, Kutubuddin Bakhtar Kaki of Delhi, Baba Farid of Punjab, Khwaja Nizamuddin Aulia of Delhi, and Bandhanawaz Gisudaraz of Gulbarga. So the Sufi master held their assemblies in the kankhas or hospice. A hospice is a home of rest for travelers, especially one kept by the religious order. Devotees of all descriptions, including members of the royalty and nobility and ordinary people, flock to these kankhas. They discuss spiritual matters, sought the blessings of the saints in solving their worldly problems, and simply attended the music and dance sessions. So you can see here, often people attributed Sufi master with miraculous powers that could relieve others of their illness and troubles. The tomb or dargah of Sufi saint become a place of pilgrimage to which thousands of people of all faith thronged. Devotees of all backgrounds visit Sufi shrines. So you can see people are visiting a Sufi shrine. So finding the Lord. Jalaluddin Rumi was a great 13th century Sufi poet from Iran, who wrote in Persian. Here is an excerpt from his work. He was not on the cross of the Christian. I went to the Hindu temples. In none of them was there any sign. He was not on the heights or in the lowlands. I went to the Kaaba of Makkah. He was not there. I asked about him from Avicenna the philosopher. He was beyond the range of Avicenna. I looked into my heart. In that his place I saw him. He was in no other place. So here in this poem, he is saying that the Lord is in the heart of every living being. New religious development in North India. The period after the 13th century saw a new wave of Bhakti movement in North India. This was an age when Islam, Brahmanical Hinduism, Sufism, various strands of Bhakti, and the Natpant, Siddhas and Yogis influenced one another. We saw that in Newtown, chapter 6, and Kingdoms, chapter 2, 3 and 4 were emerging, and people were taking up new professions and finding new roles for themselves. Such people, especially craftsperson, peasant, traders and laborers, thronged to listen to these new saints and spread their ideas. So you can see in the figure 7, here is the Sankirtan party of Lord Sri Chaitanya. So you can see Chaitanya Deva, 16th century Bhakti saint from Bengal, preached selfless devotion to Krishna and Radha. In the picture of you can see a group of his followers engaged in ecstatic dancing and singing. So they used to sing and dance about the holy name of Lord Shri Krishna and Srimati Radharani. Some of them, like Kabir and Baba Guru Nanak, rejected all orthodox religions. Others, like Tulsidas and Surdas, accepted existing belief and practices but wanted to make this accessible to all. Tulsidas conceived of God in the form of Rama. Tulsidas's compositions, the Ramcharitramanas, written in Avdiya language used in the eastern Uttar Pradesh, is important in both as an expression of his devotion and as a literary work. Surdas was an adherent devotee of Lord Shri Krishna. His composition compiled in the Sursagara Sur Saravali, and Sahitya Lahari expressed his devotion. Also contemporary was the Shankara Deva of Assam, late 15th century, who emphasized devotion to Lord Vishnu and composed poems and plays in Assamese. He began to practice of setting up namghars or house of recitation and prayers, a practice that continues to date. So you can see the essence of Shankara Deva's devotion came to be known as Eka Sarna Nama Dharma, supreme surrender to the one. The teaching of Shankara Deva were based on the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavad Purana. He also encouraged the establishment of Shastra or monasteries or for transmission of knowledge. His major compositions were Kirtana Ghosha. So this tradition also included saints like Dadu Dayal, Ravidas and Mirabai. Mirabai was a Rajput princess married into the royal family of Mewar in the 16th century. Mirabai became a disciple of Ravidas, a saint from a caste considered untouchable, and she was devoted to Lord Krishna and composed innumerable bhajans expressing her intense devotion. Her songs also openly challenged the norms of the upper caste and became popular with the mass in Rajasthan and Gujarat. A unique feature of most of the saints in that their work were composed in regional language and could be sung. They became immensely popular and were handed down orally from generation to generation. Usually the poorest, most deprived communities and women transmitted this song, often adding their own experiences. Thus the songs as we have them today are as much as a creation of the saints as a generation of people who sang them. They have become a part of our living popular culture. An important contribution of Bhakti saints was towards the development of music. Jayadeva of Bengal composed the Gita Govinda in Sanskrit. Each song composed in a particular range, raga and tala. A significant impact that these saints had on music was the use of bhajan, kirtan and abhang. These songs were emphasized on emotional experience, had a tremendous appeal in the common people. Beyond the Rana's Palace. This is a song composed by Mirabai. Ranaji, I have left your norms of shame and false decorum of the princely life. I have left your town. And yet, Rana, why have you kept up enmity against me? Rana, you give me a cup of poison, I drink it laughingly. Rana, I will not be destroyed by you. And yet, Rana, why have you kept up enmity against me? So, this was the figure of the devotee of Lord Krishna, that is Mirabai. A closer look at Kabir. Kabir, who probably lived in the 15th-16th century, was one of the most influential saints. He was brought up in a family of Muslim Julaha or weavers settled in or near the city of Banaras, Varanasi. We have little reliable information about his life. We get to know of his idea from a vast collection of verses called Sakhis and was said to have been composed by him and sung by wandering bhajan singers. Some of these were later collected and preserved in the Guru Granth Sahib, Panchwani and Bijak. So, in search of the true Lord, here is a composition of Kabir. O Allah Ram, present in all living being, have mercy on your servants, O Lord. Why bump your head on the ground? Why bathe your body in water? You kill and you call yourself humble, but your vice you conceal. 24 times the Brahmanas keep the Ekadashi fast. Why the Qazi observe the Ramzan? Tell me, why does he set aside the 11 months? To seek spiritual fruit in the 12th. Hari dwells in the east, they say, and Halla resides in the west. Search for him in your heart. In the heart of your heart, there he dwells. Rahim Ram. So here is a poem by Kabir. Kabir was working on a loom. You can see here. So, and this is a photo of Kabir. Kabir's teaching were based on a complete, indeed vehement rejection of the major religious traditions. His teaching openly ridiculed all forms of external worship of both Brahmanical Hinduism and Islam, the preeminence of the priestly classes and the caste system. The language of his poetry was form of spoken Hindi widely understood by ordinary people. He also sometimes used cryptic language which is difficult to follow. Kabir believed in a formless supreme God, and preached that the only path to salvation was through bhakti or devotion. Kabir drew his followers among both Hindus and Muslims. So Baba Guru Nanak as a young man in discussion with a holy man. So you can see here the photo of Baba Guru Nanak as a young man. A closer look in Baba Guru Nanak. We know more about Baba Guru Nanak, who lived between 1469 to 1539, than about Kabir. Born at Talwandi, Nanakkana Sahib in Pakistan, he travelled widely before establishing a centre in Kartarpur, Dera Baba Nanak on the river Ravi. A regular worship that consisted of singing of his own hymns was established there for his followers. Irrespective of their former creed, caste, or gender, his followers ate together in the common kitchen, langar. The sacred space thus created by Baba Guru Nanak was known as Dharmsal. It is now known as Gurudwara. Before his death in 1539, Baba Guru Nanak appointed one of his followers as his successor. His name was Lehna, but he came to be known as Guru Angad, signifying that he was a part of Baba Guru Nanak himself. Guru Angad compiled the composition of Baba Guru Nanak, to which he added his own in a new script known as Gurumukhi. The three successors of Guru Angad also wrote under the name of Nanak, and all of their compositions were compiled by Guru Arjan in 1604. To these compilations were added the writings of other figures like Sheikh Farid, Sant Kabir, Bhagat Namdev, and Guru Tej Bahadur. So in 1706, this compilation was authenticated by Guru Tej Bahadur's son and successor Guru Gobind Singh, and it is now known as Guru Granth Sahib, the holy scripture of the Sikhs. So in the figure 11, you can see an early manuscript of the Guru Granth Sahib. The number of the Baba Guru Nanak's followers increased through the 16th century under his successors. They belonged to a number of castes, but traders, agriculturists, artisans, and craftsmen predominated. This may have something to do with the Baba Guru Nanak's insistence that his followers must be householder and should adopt productive and useful occupations. They were also expected to contribute to the general funds of community and of followers. By the beginning of the 17th century, the town of Ramdaspur, Amritsar, had developed around the central Gurudwara called Harminder Sahib Golden Temple. It was virtually self-governing, and modern historians refer to the early 17th century Sikh community as a state within the state. The Mughal Emperor Jahangir looked upon them as a potential threat, and he ordered the execution of Guru Arjan in 1606. The Sikh movement began to get politicalized in the 17th century, a development which culminated in the institution of the Khalsa by Guru Gobind Singh in 1699. The community of the Sikhs called Khalsa Panth became a political entity. The changing historical situation during the 16th and 17th centuries influenced the development of the Sikh movement. The idea of Baba Guru Nanak had a huge impact on this development from the very beginning. He emphasized the importance of the worship of one God. He insisted that caste, creed, or gender was irrelevant for attaining liberation. His idea of liberation was not that of a state of inert bliss, but rather the pursuit of active life with a strong sense of social commitment. He himself used the term Nam, Dan, and Isnan for the essence of the teaching, which actually meant right worship, welfare of other, and purity of conduct. His teaching are now remembered as Nam Japna, Kirt Karna, and Vand Chakna, which also underline the importance of the right. Thus, Baba Guru Nanak idea of equality had social and political implications. This might partly explain the difference between the history of the followers of Baba Guru Nanak and the history of the followers of the other religious figures of the medieval centuries, like Kabir, Ravidas, and Dadu, whose ideas were very similar to those of Baba Guru Nanak. Martin Luther and the Reformation. The 16th century was a time of religious ferment in Europe as well. One of the most important leaders of the changes that took place within Christianity was Martin Luther, 1483 to 1546. Luther felt that several practices in the Roman Catholic Church went against the teachings of Bible. He encouraged the use of the language of ordinary people rather than Latin, and translated the Bible into German. Luther was strongly opposed to the practice of indulgences or making donation to the church so as to gain forgiveness from sins. His writings were widely disseminated with the growing use of the printing press. Many Protestant Christian sects trace their origins to the teaching of Luther. So you can see in the figure the title page of the German Bible translated by Martin Luther. So here the chapter 8 is finished, and we'll start the next chapter in the next class. Thank you.